doing, young man?
Wonderful. How about you?
Pretty good. Yeah, I see you got drafted also.
Yes. Ken, do you have extra agendas?
I do.
I'm too.
Which one?
We can share. Okay. that'd be fine.
There's the man of the hour right there.
I also got the,
Mhm.
One minute is
happy
fair,
birthday
Dave.
to you.
Oh, jeez.
That's our words regarding planning board, code enforcement officer.
That's who actually we're going for.
Right?
This is the statute on.
Okay.
Oh, I thought it
Start
was
the
55
conversation.
again.
All right, thanks.
Get your AARP card.
I figured they'd have some here.
You are. Perfect. Chairman is good. I gave Dan a hard time.
I've already been corrected once.
Been quite a while since I-
Not Dan, I gave him a hard
It's the same
time.
mistake I did.
Jurisdiction.
I'm just teasing. All right, I think we're ready to roll. Mic's on. It's 6 PM on the dot. Call this meeting to order. We do have a quorum tonight. Like to make and put it on the record that tonight is Mr. Corvo's birthday. We'd like to wish you a happy birthday, Dave.
Thanks.
It's not on the agenda,
Why
but.
don't you pass the hat?
But it is in the minutes. Oh, I'm sorry.
We'll wait for you, Dave, just a
I can
minute.
straighten that out for you. As it happens, we got 2 batteries right here.
All right, we have a public hearing. A rezoning request from Mr. LaJoy regarding map 7, lot 26, York Street. A request from I-2 to R3. Public meeting will be open at 6:02.
So you have before you the request for rezoning on 201 York Street, map 7, lot 26, from an I2 industrial zone to an R3 rural residential zone. So the idea is to eventually share this property with family and build residences. Currently in the I2 that would not be allowed, that'd be a non-conformance. This is kind of a unique shaped lot. It's divided by the old railroad right-of-way that runs right through it, but it's still all considered one, albeit strange shaped and elongated, bisected lot. So, also at your seat this evening was a letter from John LaJoy regarding the questions we had from the last meeting. Basically, the intent was to rezone the entire lot. And actually, Mark is present tonight, if you'd like to pitch your project to us.
I'm Mark LaJoy, I'm John's son. I'm probably getting on an airplane right now, so that's why I'm here on his behalf.
My wife and 2 kids, we want to build a house up there on South of York Street.
Do you mind actually coming to the podium?
Sure.
Just so, for the mic, thank you.
Yeah. We'd like to build a house on York Street up there, about from our warehouse. We don't see any
reason to keep part of that zone industrial unless the city sees a reason for it in the future. But that's kind of the idea, so that's it.
If you're familiar with that site, the railroad runs through it, that actually used for trails, so ATV, snowmobile trails are present there. If you step, I guess it would be kind of north and west across the railroad right-of-way. It's heavily wooded and kind of swampy. That's actually my playground when I was a youngster. We used to walk the stream from the bridge on Washington Street all the way down to the trestle. But really would not be the greatest site to try to add an industrial type application to. It's been 30 years or better since the rail had delivered oil to that site, and that's the only reason that probably that was an industrial site to start with is the Burst Carter oil tank there. The remnants of the siding are there, the old concrete abutments where they used to drop the oil and pump it into the tanks there. But that's been at least 30 years since the railroad has served that area. So. Code enforcement has no issues with this. I think that in the end, I think we'll be actually adding value to the city by allowing residential development to happen there. So the final step, should we approve this rezoning public hearing this evening, this actually has to go to the Caribou City Council because the rezoning is actually an active ordinance. So we would make our our request one way or the other, either we support this issue or not, to the City Council.
Close the public hearing, I'll make a motion.
I was gonna say, is there any comment? I don't think there's anybody else's comment on this. Yeah. Can close the public hearing at 6:06. I have to hit the gavel. Am I supposed to hit the gavel?
You can if you like. You have the power.
Any discussions internally?
No
No
discussion.
discussions?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we, that the planning board vote to approve the zoning request, the change.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to send to the city council this rezoning request. Any further discussion? I'll take a roll call vote. Steve?
Yes.
JR?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Very good, thank you. Good luck with your project. We'll be looking for the building permits next.
Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Everybody has the minutes in front of them.
But you want a motion, don't you?
Unless if there's any requested amendments.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Eric and seconded by Dave. Take a roll call vote. Steve?
Yes.
JR?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
1 second, we'll do a little housekeeping here. We've got a bunch of minutes that were approved as amended, that have been amended. The first one still says Liz. If you would just initial that and sign that one as well, Mr. Secretary. And this is this evening's. Thank you.
We don't have to call him Liz, do we?
No.
All right.
Just anywhere on there, Ken, or the last page where she has
Yeah, just the one with Liz on it, just
initials by that?
initial it anywhere and make your signature, and we'll know
Okay.
that, what happened there. I think I get the wrong one there.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so that one's signed.
There we go.
Is that the only one? Okay. I actually put JR on that.
Okay,
My apologies.
still good.
That will be a tough one to break. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
Lovely. Councilman Bagley, you are up.
Well, good evening, Planning Board. Mr. Murchison, thanks for having me. Got a couple updates from the council. It's been, I think I missed the last meeting, wasn't able to attend. I guess most importantly, the city council approved our municipal budget. There are 3 elements to that budget, and all 3 components were approved. It's a preliminary budget because we still haven't received the final budget from RSU 39. And when that comes in, that impacts everything. And so we have to kind of look at everything again and do a final budget based on that. So the good news is the $17,000 for the comprehensive plan made it through and was approved in the expense budget. But it still has to survive the final budget deliberations once we get the school budget in.
Is that for the sub-consultant for the NMBC?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The Caribou Development Committee was approved by the council on 13 March as a new Chapter 22 in our ordinance. Several applications have been received. It actually becomes effective today, 30 days after it passes. It becomes effective, so we have, as of today, a new ordinance, 22, which establishes the Caribou Development Committee. And we've got several applications that we received from citizens who want to serve on that. So that's good news.
We did offer the actual.
Oh, okay, you have that in your
In
packet.
the packet.
Excellent. Is that, and that's
look at that.
that's the past version, right?
Correct.
Yep, good. On the 27th, the council gave their approval to proceed with architectural and engineering development contract with Artifacts. This is the company that the city's been working with all along in its preliminary planning for the new police station. So that's moving along. Don't really have a sense yet what the timeline is for deliverables or anything like that, but that contract will be going forward. Trailer park redevelopment.
Dan, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Is there a building committee for that, or is that just council and?
There is a committee for that,
Is it-
yes. Yeah. It's like a public safety committee,
Public
I
safety
believe. I can give you the formal name, but I think they've been handling that.
Right. I'm just wondering if there's going to be any comprehensive plan stuff that will be needed now that that's moving forward?
Well, I would think so.
Yeah.
I believe the planned location is the old Birdseye site.
Yep.
And so there will be a lot of work to do on that as
Mhm.
developments proceed. Other than that, I don't see anything else coming to the planning board anytime soon.
No, just want to make sure that it's, how do we, make note of that in the comprehensive plan, or should it even be?
Do we have a public safety?
We do.
Put it right in there.
Okay.
New police station was voted actually last year.
Okay.
And so we're at the beginning of the
Yeah.
comprehensive plan period to say, we're going to do this new police station.
Can we include any schematic designs or anything like that that come through in the comprehensive plan?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's a lot to draw from previous
Yeah, I know.
planning and.
Yeah.
It is the Public Safety Committee that's handling that.
Okay, thank you.
Trailer park redevelopment, so the Caribou Community Garden, planning continues for that. The Airport Committee will receive an update tomorrow during our meeting. The Airport Committee meets tomorrow morning. And so we've asked for an update on how planning is going and what's going to happen this summer with that. The short-term rental cabins concept, currently under discussion with the FAA. We've had a couple different discussions with them at the city manager level and received some feedback from them. And so we're digging through that and trying to figure out what all that means. The Caribou Airport Advisory Committee, that's the citizens committee that kind of oversees developments and stuff at the airport. They've considered the concept and they've weighed in formally against allowing that at the airport for a number of different reasons. And they submitted a letter to the city council, and that's been forwarded and is under consideration now. So that's the news on that. Any questions there on that one?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question
Sure.
on that. What were some of the, were you at that meeting, number one?
I was, I've been in multiple discussions with the FAA as well as the consultant, the city's consultant for the airport. And I was in the conversation with the city manager with the FAA as well, talking to the same people.
And what are some of the issues that the advisory committee seemed to think was negative factors about that whole idea and concept?
Yeah, in general, it did not seem to consider the airport master plan that exists. And the idea of putting residential on the airport is inconsistent with other plans that are already in the master plan. And so, and they had some concerns as well about, noise and traffic and that kind of thing going on up there for that. And on the city side, there's some concern about funding and making sure that we as a city and the sponsor of the airport maintain compliant with FAA expectations on use of that land. And so anything that we do contrary to that risks funding for the airport, ongoing infrastructure funding. So that in general, but it's a pretty extensive letter. It'll be coming out publicly here pretty soon, and you can take a look at it and walk through it. Nylander Museum. So some of you may recall that we had a board of trustees, and that was disbanded and put under the library. Well, recently there's been interest in reconstituting a citizens working board. And so the council considered that and voted this week, actually, to reconstitute that citizens board. So that'll become effective next month as an amendment to Chapter 15 in the ordinance. And a call for citizen volunteers will go out soon on that. And finally, you may be aware we have a facade improvement program within the city. It's a really excellent program that provides grants for local businesses who want to maybe dress up their storefronts.
Just in the TIF district, though, right?
In the TIF district, I believe that's true.
Yep.
So we awarded $7,500 to Skin by Megan Deneen at 149 Bennett Drive, and that's the old Pizza Hut building. and I'm sure you've driven by it and seen what a wonderful job they've done, putting a facelift of an entire building. So that's a great success story there. And that's all I had. Any other questions? Great, thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks.
Item 5, new business.
So some time ago, actually, I think Steve Wentworth would have been sitting in this chair when the concept came out of a zoning board of appeals, but not only a zoning board of appeals, but a regional zoning board of appeals. The first one of its kind in the county, and I think still the only one. But I think it's a good model to follow. Joining us tonight are Louis Cousins and George Howes. They're on our zoning board of appeals and newly sworn in just this evening. So they're good for a couple of years. Margaret Pierce couldn't make it this evening. She's actually in another council meeting in Portage or Ashland this evening. And Travis Michaud is actually on vacation. He's out of town altogether. So we still have room for one more. We can have anywhere from 3 to 5 on the zoning board of appeals. So I may reach out to Don Cody, who's a past member. Don's been active in code enforcement in the county for a long, long time, and is a great fountain of knowledge there. So we should be able to tap his knowledge and bring him into the fold. I think he's had interest in the past, and I've got past applications from Don, so we'll reach out. So the idea is to have this conversation this evening. It doesn't have to be a long conversation, but basically, since the time I've been here and sometime before that, I don't believe we've ever had anyone avail themselves of the appeals process. So either the planning board's doing a great job vetting these projects and doing our approvals and non-approvals appropriately, or people don't know that there's a process by which they can appeal one way or the other. However, that day probably will come. You know, sometimes mistakes are made, or they could be assumed that they were made. Someone may avail themselves of the appeals process eventually. So I thought it would be a good conversation to have to know what the process or what our roles as the planning board, as a code enforcement officer, and the zoning board of appeals would be. So basically, as a board, most projects that aren't approved administratively by the code enforcement officer have to come here to the planning board. Typically would have a public hearing and would approve or not approve a project. So in that case, if a mistake is made and maybe it's a misunderstanding on how the code works, or maybe the applicant feels that they were somehow discriminated against, they could, within a certain amount of time, mount an appeal. So if that came through to the code enforcement officer, I would have like 10 days, it says the actual times in our code, to contact our zoning board of appeals. We'd set up a meeting, do all the notifications and so forth. And then the zoning board of appeals would take up the project de novo, so I had to look that up. I wasn't entirely sure what that means. From the start, basically they want to know the whole history of the applicant's process. And they would then look at our code and the process that we went through and make sure that one, it was either correct, or two, that there might be room for appeal. The thing about the appeals is that for the most part, we have to follow very close to the code, and appeals needs to show a hardship. And in order to prove a hardship, you can't just say, well, I spent all this money on this property, I should be able to do what I want. That's not a hardship. A hardship might be, I guess a classic example, and it spells it out right in our code and in the state statute as well, a disability. So existing non-conforming structure, there's a request for a building permit to do a handicap access. or a living space so that a person could be able to access their home and use it. That would be an appeal that would be accepted, I believe, typically speaking. So, but for the most part, like I said, just because you paid money for it, that does not make that a hardship. In actual zoning board of appeals process, I actually attended one years ago, about 30 years ago, for an appeal in a residential area in town. So there was a small garage, needed to be knocked down in order to make room for a larger garage. However, the offsets weren't they were too close to the street, and the rear wall actually sat on the property line. So not only were they going to violate the setbacks, but they're also going to make it more non-conforming, larger structure. So at the time, the code enforcement officer said, okay, we'll do an appeal, and they assembled the zoning board of appeals, and they went through the process and actually awarded that appeal. That's my garage, it exists today. However, looking back, I cannot say that constituted a hardship. So I guess yay for me, I got my big garage, but the system didn't really work that well in that application. And that's really why I wanted George Lewis here, because they've had a lot more experience in this than I have. I've only been around it for 5 years. They've got, I won't say how many years, many more years than that of experience. So if you guys would, if you could relate your experiences with the zoning board of appeals, that'd be great.
So we'll come up. Yes, I'm Louis Cousins, and yes, I've been at it a while. 2000 was the year I first got certified. I think we're very close in time. I've worked in several towns: Mapleton, Chapman, Castle Hill, Portage, Ashland, Mars Hill, New Sweden, Stockholm,
Keep going.
Westfield.
Keep going.
Garfield, did I say Garfield? So I've been around that block a little bit. I now work for the city of Presque Isle as an assessor, and have had those experiences. Ken, talking about a regional board, there's a story, very true story, where the town of Stockholm actually had the first regional board by court order. And that happened because they had an appeal to some ordinance standards that their appeals board started out on the right track, held a meeting, had all the parties involved, and then closed the meeting saying, we'll come back and open again and make a decision. And they didn't. They made a decision behind closed doors and sent it off, and it was not in favor of the appellant. So there was already 2 lawyers involved, and that went to court real quick. And the court ordered the town to revisit and appoint a board of appeals that could do the job right. So those experiences go a long, long ways. So we know that. So just as far as being appointed here, happy to serve. We do have that experience. I know it's a difficult position to fill sometimes, and the experience and the training that comes with it is pretty crucial in knowing and understanding those processes. So I'll leave it there. If you have any questions for me, though.
So I thought the aspect of having a regional application for ZBA, Zoning Board of Appeals, is that you have a working board that can come in unbiased to any given project. So, you know, it's hard for us to be totally unbiased because we've looked at the project, we've studied it, and came up with our decision. And so how do we step away from that and take a fresh look? But the ZBA can come in and take that fresh look and offer the guidance that we may need, or say to the appellate, well, you really don't have a hardship here, and like that.
Those words can mention de novo are very legal terms, and it is important to start fresh. You start fresh with the application and the ordinance, understand the ordinance and what is supposed to apply, make sure that the city did their review proper and came up with the right decision, and if it's the right decision, it sticks. That's the way it is.
So, and this appeals can constitute an issue with the planning board, and a decision of the planning board, and it can also constitute an issue with the code enforcement officer.
And
Just to add on to that, just to add on to that a little bit, generally speaking, the appeals board, what's going to look at is that you followed the proper procedure. If there's any flaws in that procedure, then it's possible that that could get overturned. But as long as the procedures are followed, generally speaking, the board doesn't overturn a decision that either the code enforcement or the planning board makes. And if we do make a decision, then the only other appeal to that is directly to court, and that's Superior Court. As far as the setbacks go, there again, generally speaking, the appeals board can grant 20% on a reduction. Any more than that, it really needs to be looked at extremely hard. But that's generally the limit that the appeals board goes by, is the 20%. And thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
thanks.
So, any questions from the planning board, how they might interact with our zoning board of appeals? We haven't met since I've been here, and I can't think of it in 10 years even. So it's been a while.
I was going to say, I think Steve put this together in '06. Does that sound right?
I think I scared everyone off from asking for an appeal.
Yeah.
And that was the intent.
Uh,
To get an appeal is the undue hardship part.
Yeah,
It's next to impossible
Yeah.
to actually prove an undue hardship. It can be because of an action of the applicant. I mean, there's what, 4, 5, 6 different things that they would have to show, and it has to be not just one of them, but all of them. So really, it's next to impossible. And the benefit of Lewis and George, they've got 40-plus years of reading ordinances and state statute. So to have Lewis and George on our zoning board of appeals, they're bringing a lot of value. And I think Ken you've got a feeler out for Don Cody.
Yeah.
And Don, again, spent many years with the DEP, LURC, shoreline zoning and timber harvesting, many of those things that people may get into trouble with. So Caribou was very fortunate to have Lewis and George willing to come to town if needed.
May I ask a question? Do you mind? What flexibility does the planning board have in, we'll say, issuing variances, so to speak? Setback is 20 feet, somebody comes in, they're really close to 17, and say, close enough, and sign off on it. Do they have the authority to do that?
You gotta read every line in there. George is right. The law allows 20% in most cases.
But from the planning board, or does
No.
it have to go to appeal?
Should be.
So they don't have
Okay.
any flexibility of,
No, they're supposed to
Fudging
be
the
following the
numbers.
ordinance that
Yeah.
they put in place.
yeah.
interesting.
And kind of a comical way of looking at it is the planning board makes the rules, the zoning board breaks them.
Yeah.
That, obviously have to do it in the correct way.
We've had discussions in the past, remember?
What do they
about
call that?
waivers, what
Yeah.
Can we waive things? Can we vary?
Reasonable, I mean, it's very,
And
there's some vague language.
It's kind of
struggle
great.
with that on some of the
Yeah.
applications that have come in and.
Yeah.
So is the flavor, is the question the fact that the city might like a little flexibility more than the strict criteria of,
That would be good.
That would really need to be put in the form of an ordinance. Otherwise, you're bound by what
Yeah.
you have in place. So it would be a
Yeah.
matter of changing your ordinance to make it what it is that fits your needs.
And that's basically what we followed for many years.
Yeah.
I mean, we look at the ordinance and we judge by the ordinance.
so in this law is another set of language that's not in your ordinance, and it deals with practical difficulty.
What difficulty?
Practical difficulty, which is along the same lines of what you're asking about. I've had the very good experience of working in one town that had practical difficulty language in their ordinance. And it does free up, it takes away that strict construing of the hardship, and it brings it down to a practical difficulty, as long as you're not in the shoreline zone. So I happen to have some copies if you'd like to look at them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's going to be, I think, 8. E, section 7E.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Came prepared.
Variances. There we go.
So this is a
Yeah.
section from another time on the Board of Appeals, but it's just that section of language.
So it's an ideal time for us to be looking at these, because we're coming into the comprehensive plan. It'd be a good time to make ordinance changes.
And we get that all the time from citizens. Why do you have to be so strict?
Yeah,
It's in the ordinance. That's our job.
right.
Any more questions of our ZBA while we've got them here? Well, thanks a lot, guys, for
Yes.
coming out. I didn't want to keep you all night, but we are going to have a conversation on LED 2003, which is an
Yeah.
act to implement the recommendations for the commission to increase housing opportunities in the state of Maine by studying zoning and land use restrictions, basically allowing people to do accessory dwellings in a large way all over the state. So I know it's giving a lot of people heartburn. It's something that will affect, one way or another, our ordinance. And, if you'd like to join in the conversation, you're certainly welcome. That's kind of my segue to that next section.
That's perfect, because I think when we went through the land use tables, we have a section that has an accessory dwelling on it. And I can't remember what the conversation was, but I think my thought is that we might want to revisit that before we send that over to the city council and maybe get some feedback.
So there's a lot to this proposal. It would allow up to, 3 accessory dwellings? So you can imagine a quarter-acre lot here in town with a house on it, with 3 accessory dwellings, either attached to the building or separate. So we still have to consider things like setback.
Did we write something in temporarily on the,
So what we've been told by the instructions they've given us so far is that we should consult our legal attorney, our legal counsel. We haven't yet. I've thrown up all the red flags already. I wanted to have this conversation first. But, yeah, that's something that we should think about. There are other ways to regulate these new allowances. One would be covenants on properties. So in a subdivision, the covenant may be that there's no more than one accessory dwelling or no accessory dwellings. Covenants are something that the city technically doesn't follow for these subdivisions. As a matter of fact, we've explored reasons why subdivisions covenants will probably no longer valid in that many times in a subdivision, what's supposed to happen is you'd have a homeowners association, so you'd have an active kind of committee working all the time. Most of the subdivisions we see, that doesn't actually occur. All you see is these covenants attached to the deed, owner after owner after owner. So there's some legal gray room there, whether or not they still count or not. Excuse me. Typically, it's not part of our ordinance to follow a covenant on a subdivision. But if you talk to realtors, They think there's a lot of value in these covenants because it keeps the neighborhood the way that it was designed. They think there's more value there.
But the city has no role in
Really?
enforcing a covenant.
No,
We never
really,
have.
no, no.
So,
The last time we had this conversation was home occupation application in the neighborhood. Actually had a home occupation in this structure historically, one other one. The person came forward looking for a home occupation. We as the planning board, saw no reason that couldn't occur. But there was some outpouring from the public during our public hearing that was a concern. It went against the covenants of that subdivision.
on the other hand, I remember in the application, there is a question in there about covenants for a particular project. Are there any applicable covenants or whatever? Most people would say no, but we never look into it. Why would that even be on our application if we don't really care?
Historic thing for that application.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know with we had our required section for housing for the comprehensive plan. Steve was the team leader for that one. And the conversation of covenants came up again. So that's still out there. It's still a concern.
When I read through the 2003, I didn't see that the state addressed covenants and subdivisions. Everything I read stipulates the municipalities. So what I came away with, it's like every municipality that has an R1 zone intended for single-family homes, we need to change the R1 to an R2. And we need to have, I think, strict enforcement of setbacks and density, which is lot coverage, so that if the structures aren't allowed to exceed 30% of the lot coverage, and we have 20-foot setbacks from the streets, 10 feet from the side or rear or whatever, as long as they can comply with the building permit applications, from what I read, the state will bring charges against the municipalities if the municipalities don't enforce or allow these homeowners to put on additions or small buildings in the backyard.
Right, but they still have to meet sewer and water restrictions.
I think the
that's
wording
where
was
people are
in the
gonna run
urban-
into trouble.
In
Yeah,
the
if you're in
rural
the
areas,
urban
you're
area.
saying one accessory dwelling
Right.
Say that again, in the rural?
in the rural area. So our R3 district, where you have a primary dwelling, you would be allowed a single accessory dwelling. And it had to do with just that, water and septic. However, if you get into our multifamily situation in our residential districts in the downtown area, they were making some really interesting changes in things like how many parking spots do you have. Instead of having, for instance, 2 parking spots per dwelling unit, now they would have 1 parking spot per 3 dwelling units, which works great if you're in an urban society like Portland
That has transportation?
that has public transportation, or people can walk to where they need to go. But to me, that means you're going to have a lot of people parking in the road. And we fight awful hard to keep people from parking in the road. So, and rightfully so, in the wintertime, we have to keep that road clear. So this is a law that actually is going to go into place July of this year. They're still doing the rulemaking. They're still having workshops and public hearings on this thing. Rural communities flat out do not like it. In the settings that I've listened in on, the last one was kind of a fly on the wall in a Zoom session, just listening. But larger communities are struggling to come to some sort of solution for the housing problems they have, and they really grasp onto this. Unfortunately, it's a one-size-fits-all scenario for the whole state, and it might not be the best scenario for more rural communities.
I did read that they extended the effective date to
Have they?
2025.
Have
Oh, they did?
That's what I read. Don't quote me on it, but I'm certain I read it somewhere.
Steve, to your comment about having to change all of R1 to R2, none of the R1 lot sizes will meet.
I bet they do.
In the R1?
Yeah.
Isn't the lot size, the minimum lot size, I don't know, 0.1 acres? What's the minimum lot size for R2?
The minimum lot size is 9,600 square feet,
For R1?
but if we have water and sewer, you could probably go with a smaller lot size if you had a modest-sized dwelling. But you're talking about fairly dense development. And if that's already densely developed and you're going to add 2 and 3 accessory dwellings, we're going to look like Johannesburg. I mean, it's going to be, and people will want to be putting up sheds instead of houses, and they'll want to, so it's going to be a headache at the planning board level and at the code enforcement level, because people are going to come and say, yes, I want a tiny home, and I bought one down to Lowe's. Oh my goodness, you know, show me the roof design, show me the insulation, show me, it's going to be difficult.
I could keep
Yeah.
that in, once you hit the 3 dwelling units, you're looking at another subdivision.
Well, that's the question that the state hasn't, that the state says that's a subdivision, right?
Again,
3 or more dwelling
3
units.
more
Yeah.
dwelling units.
Right, so if there's already 2, and they just add the 1 more, okay, now you're into the subdivision again, and that's gonna get expensive quick for the residential type homeowner.
So I just wanted to give everyone the heads up that this is the thing that's happening. I will look to see if it's been extended out, because that does make sense that they would do that. We will check with our legal counsel, and
As I
have
say, that's
something, Louis?
an awesome idea of the legal counsel, but this law is already in conflict with what you just brought up, subdivision.
Yeah.
It's in conflict with wastewater rules
Yeah.
outside of the city, and it's in conflict with everybody's local ordinance. It also, and to me, the bigger issue is it's an erosion of your home rule authority,
Mhm.
which comes from the Constitution.
Right.
Right.
And the lawmakers have tried to.
that was the quote I inserted into our agenda this evening. The LLD 2003 is an express preemption on municipal home rule authority.
Yep.
That is concerning.
Yeah, very much.
Don't the subsurface rules, any expansion of bedrooms is considered a major expansion now?
Major expansion.
So they'd have to have a site evaluator come, design, leach bed, septic tank, everything to be in compliance with the 90 gallons per day per bedroom. It's more expense. But out in the R3, if someone wanted to do this and meet the subsurface rules, they could.
But what he's saying is that it's not allowed in the, you're only allowed 2 in the in the rural zones, right?
The one accessory dwelling.
1 accessory, right, so 1 and
So,
1 accessory.
But
and that's
again,
it.
That would
septic
trigger a new site evaluation for the
Right.
subsurface
For the subsurface,
wastewater.
yes, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is an issue. We're gonna look right into it, and we'll keep you posted, I guess.
I've got a question. Can we craft that so that we have to have a public hearing, so the neighbors come in and bus loads and make a lot of noise?
I think the law is saying we can't, right?
That's the whole preemption of home rule.
Yeah.
Did we write something in our, again, I'm remembering back to our sessions that we were going over specifically about, and it might have been more on tiny homes, but specifically requiring that they meet the main uniform building and energy code.
Correct.
'Cause you can't just go by a
So
shed
now
from
we have to
Lowe's.
reassess exactly what that says.
Right, yeah.
So it's interesting times we live in.
The fun just begins.
There's another law they've done, that's also stepping on our home rule, and it's escaping me right now, but there's a second one out there that, this last legislature felt free to just take it upon themselves to Any laws that affect us?
They should make it so you can opt in.
Yeah.
No.
We're already struggling with one of those.
I know, but I mean, at least it gives the municipalities the option.
Thank you for this, by the way, that's interesting.
Came from me.
That's all I had regarding the LOD 2003.
Very interesting.
So next would be scheduling our next required section for the comprehensive plan. Dave Corvo is actually the team leader for this one. So fiscal capacity and capital investment plan. So Dave, if you would get with me and see what information you need, I'll glean it from staff, whatever I get, this year's budget and things like that. We need to start thinking about our committee, so we try to get a hold of people that want to talk about these things, and schedule for, I thought I wrote down the schedule. We had it for like the 29th, and you're going to be out of town after that, the 28th.
Yeah, I leave the end of the month, but I can meet with you next week,
Okay.
and we can,
So I thought you were leaving on the 29th, and we're going to have it on the 28th or something like that.
28th is a Friday.
No, we don't want it
27th is
on
a
Friday.
Thursday.
right, 27 is a Thursday.
We'll get together and talk about that.
Okay.
Good.
When you have a moment, give me a call, and I can scoot down.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you both.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Have a good evening. So when we're talking about required sections, it's looking like we might kind of preempt the schedule a little bit for the May one and insert the Riverfront Development Committees. We wanted to do a dedicated section to that effort, so the Riverfront Renaissance Committee.
Is its own section in the comprehensive plan?
Correct.
Okay.
We also wanted one for education. We haven't solved that one yet.
Yep.
But, so the idea would be to meet in actually, kind of like the same formula they use for the kickoff meeting for the comprehensive plan, using the same contact list. Maybe getting Christina Kane Gibson to help us out with that. So not only are we going to have our required section meeting, but we'll also have a public forum for that master plan effort that's ongoing. So we're going to get a couple birds with that one stone and maybe have a little larger section meeting in May. So am I on a roll? We're moving
You're
right
on a
along?
roll.
So, item D on this new business is a home occupations application for John Cars on 461 Plant Road, map 19, lot 24A. Doing business is Emery's Outpost. Basically, he wants to do retail-type business out of one room of his house for sporting goods, selling fishing supplies and all like that. Mr. Karst actually came to us last year with an idea, more of a, kind of like a restaurant-type idea.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, location wasn't good, and state licensure and all those kinds of things you have to do with a restaurant. So he quickly realized that wouldn't be a good application for that far out on the plant road. However, if you happen to be on your way to the woods or to go fishing, that might not be that far out of the way. And we don't have a lot of sporting goods stores around, so he's looking into that. He's currently looking into his reseller's license.
Ken, I don't believe there's any place in Caribou that you can buy a spool of fishing line.
You can at Luke's Small Engine.
Luke Small Engine.
Yep.
No kidding.
Yes.
Who would figure that?
Sleepers has a limited
Yep.
selection, and Willette's has a limited selection
Yeah.
of stuff that you can get.
Otherwise, it's the store in New Sweden.
New Sweden.
Small
Yeah.
engine and.
Right?
She's.
So you would
got a lot
think
of
that,
extra.
that we
Yeah.
live in a
Yeah.
rural, a rural type neighborhood, that you'd have a sporting goods type store, but not so much.
I've always thought we should have an Orvis store,
Orvis would be outstanding.
wouldn't it?
So I put together the package that Mr. Carr shared with us so far. I think he's starting to check off just about all the boxes. He's doing a good job
Okay.
there. And we should probably go ahead and
He's gonna be-
schedule a public meeting, a public hearing for May.
For May? He's gonna be ready?
I believe so.
Okay. I took a quick look through our ordinance now, and all it says is that the accessory to residential can't be any more than 50%.
He's got,
So,
yeah, he's got 144 square feet. He's 12 by 12 room.
yeah.
It used to be apparently a hair salon, but I
Oh.
find no record of that anywhere.
Oh.
He just recently purchased the property, so.
That sounds familiar.
Does it?
Yeah.
I know he's only got one neighbor, so it's gonna be pretty easy to reach out for people. The mailing list is gonna be short.
Oh, because it's right on the town.
Within 500 feet, it's, Mr. Griffith owns the farm all around him.
Yeah. Oh, within 500 feet. Gotcha. And then it's right on the town line, too. Yeah. Interesting.
So we'll get right after that.
All right. Well, I will. Is there any discussion on the application in front of us? Hearing none. Chair will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion, we move forward on this.
Move forward to
Accept?
accept.
The public hearing date?
Yeah.
Have a motion,
Second.
seconded by Steve. Any discussion? Take a roll call vote. Steve?
Yes.
JR?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Motion passes to schedule a public hearing.
Do we know what the date is for that meeting in May?
It will be May 11th. Thank you.
Thank you.
It is also my 55th birthday today. Right, it's the second Thursday, so the 11th. Yeah.
You're kidding, right?
No, I'm glad it's not my birthday.
Okay, and finally, on the new business, I wanted to continue our conversation about rezoning requests and nonconformance. We've had a rash of requests lately for rezoning. The public hearing tonight was an example of that. We've also had one right here on High Street. I have one here on Main Street, up the street. We've got one on Solomon Street. So I think it's a good time for us to re-examine our proposed zoning map and see we can make the mixed-use technique best use of that. We can kind of look at those areas that perhaps should be residential that are now commercial in other areas. And again, that's part of our comprehensive plan effort. So I should think that if we studied that map a little bit, we probably could make more sense in zoning by going back and see, okay, these areas on our Main Street, on High Street, on Sweden Street have always been a mix of residential and commercial use. Why would not that be a mixed use? So that's the conversation we've already had. There are other areas that maybe it was just a convenient place to draw a line. It ended up all commercial, or maybe it was an oversight that it was all residential. So we should take another look at that zoning map and say, okay, what makes most sense for these areas? In the past, we've gone through everything from setbacks from the center line of the road to trying to carve out along property lines. When that doesn't work, using a mixture of both techniques. And so, you know, lots of times those zones were a convenient line to follow, maybe not the best application for our zoning needs.
Is there a possibility, I'm just thinking, right now, everybody seems to be happy with their neighbors. Could this possibly lead to things getting a little bit out of hand?
It could. But that's why we need to take a close look.
Well,
You mean in the mixed use?
Yeah.
Specifically?
So,
specifically, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
that is true.
Yeah.
And also, okay, in a recent conversation with another group, we're talking about, we don't really have any more industrial sites left. So where's our next industrial park?
Mhm.
Well, we're currently cleaning up the Bird's Eye site, but that's going to, a large portion, or a portion of that will be the police station. So we're going to lose a couple acres in parking lots and infrastructure for that structure. So that leaves us with, 13 acres left to redevelop.
The
So
city
what
owns
happens if we...
13 acres. Is
The
that what
Bird's
you're-
Eye site. So the
13
Bird's Eye
acres.
site is like
Okay.
20?
19, yeah, something like that.
And it goes towards...
Goes south.
Yeah, okay.
So
So
people
will
are starting to
that-
look at,
Sorry, will that require a rezoning to get the public safety building there?
Technically,
good
it
question.
should, because that's an industrial zone. and
Yeah.
that's-
Because it's currently an industrial
I
zone.
wonder if police
Right.
station is in our land use table.
You have not checked?
I would assume that they were going to get the proper permits to carry forward.
I don't know, I think the planning board should just,
Deny.
rubber stamp that one, deny, no, I'm just kidding. Do I have the land use table in here? I might have taken it out when we did the, I don't see
Can
it.
there be a category for like a municipal office, public,
Back here.
I think it's under public safety.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Actually, I would be surprised if that wasn't allowed in an industrial site.
Well, that's what I was wondering. We should probably take a look at that. I don't have it here.
Didn't we do something in industrial that also allowed commercial?
There are
Like a
some commercial
percentage.
applications that are,
I think we
That are suitable.
we made a modification to the ordinance at one time that then allowed commercial in the industrial. Because we don't have a lot of industrial that actually comes along. We have better chances of commerce coming along than someone to manufacture.
so the questions that have been thrown at me lately is why don't we look at the land directly north of the industrial light park? So from Aldridge, where the park and ride is,
Mhm.
with snow sleds, and that area that extends out towards the hospital.
That
So-
backside.
A lot of it, actually, the last time we talked about that, we talked to Christine Solomon, who was there, and it's actually Solomon's Holdings that has that property. So I don't know what their plans are, but there are people in town looking at that area for some sort of development.
There's a lot of
Yeah,
swamp.
because the Aldrich, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I apologize. There's a lot of wet land in there, back there. A lot
So-
of wet land.
So on the edges, fronting Route 1 on the Van Buren Road, it's kind of wet there. But after that, there's actually the sewer main comes up through there to the hospital,
Okay.
all the way down to, I want to say, Crown Park Inn before it crosses over and goes towards Limestone Street, across the highway. So the infrastructure is, you could argue, is already kind of there. They would probably have to have well water out there.
I think part of that's a great big potato field.
There's a
currently.
lot of
It's
field
about
there,
100
too.
acre potato field, I think.
Yeah.
So but again, it's in private holdings. You know, are we going to try to rezone that for future use? When, who knows what the private owners will have imagined for that same land. So
Maybe just to wait until the requests come in
could be.
and then work with the applicant.
So anyway, I thought it's kind of coincidental that we're talking about our proposed land use, or we're talking about our proposed zoning, and we're having all these requests
Yeah.
for rezoning. So it's a good time to kind of step back and say, hold it. Let's take a look and see what makes most sense. What's this going to be? What's the best thing? What's the best plan for the city? What zoning works best for us?
Can, and just throwing this out there, can we send through the rezoning by itself and then follow up with the land use table afterwards? Because I still think we have some work to do on the land use table. But the rezoning with the riverfront development, I don't think they necessarily have to go together.
That would be, I think, however the planning board wants to send it. It's an act of ordinance, so we have to send it along to the council, so if you want
Right.
When questions on zoning end up in court, the first thing the judge usually
Land
asks
use
for
table.
is the table and the map to go with it, to make sure that they are,
Conforming.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering about the map by itself and the definitions.
So while we're looking at the zoning map, we've already kind of gone through, we're like 95% complete on the land
Yeah.
use table, say.
Yeah,
So we should be able to adapt our zoning map and adopt, one, the multi-use, the mixed-use application.
mhm.
And then the rest of it, the land use table stands anyway. So if we're going to make an
Right.
adjustment to an R2 district, it's no longer going to be commercial, but R2, that's already covered in our land use table.
Right,
So we should be able to pack the whole thing in one package and send it along.
okay.
I think. So that's the conversation I needed to have with that, and I think that
Where's,
we can conduct that in large part at the next meeting as well.
is noise in a R1,
Okay, so
R2?
So that project came to my office. A young person came in and thought that they were ready and they were going to buy Noise Flower Shop. It turns out that never happened. Unfortunately, whatever happened, they decided, okay, maybe the business plan wasn't going to work for them. They realized that maybe didn't have the funding. I don't know the whole story, but they stepped back. So that's not going to happen. However, we still have a non-conforming use out there in an R2 neighborhood. And I can't imagine that use not being there. I mean, every kid since 1965 has gone by there to see Santa's Workshop in the window. What would Franklin Street look like without Noise Flower Shop being there? So I don't know how you would handle, that's a very specific example of a non-conformance. The neighborhood kind of grew up around it.
Wouldn't that be a previously existing
It would be.
non-conformance?
But how would you add to it?
That's the problem.
So if you wanted to add a couple greenhouse structures, you could do portable ones I think that would pass the straight face test.
You can't expand for square footage. So,
So,
But for right now, where they have not followed through on their offer.
so that's not gonna happen apparently. I haven't heard why,
Right, but,
and not that I would anyway.
No.
Actually, I was fairly impressed with the young person that came in. Seemed to have a good idea and a business plan. So I'm thinking when finally they got to the last minute and penciled that paper and they thought, oh, it's not gonna work. That's what I'm thinking.
okay.
the other one, Ken, 658 Main Street, is that the old Ford dealership?
It's the old Ford dealership.
Okay.
So in conversations with the owner there, believes that they can do a residential type development there.
To convert the whole building into residential?
So that was the initial conversation. The secondary conversation is, oh no, we need to keep the front part commercial because it's already set up for commercial office space. So my conversation, my part of the conversation is, well, you can only have one or the other.
Is that commercial too?
It's commercial too. So where you might make a claim that you could have an apartment accessory to the use, you can't
Like
have-
just across the street.
Right, you can't have 8 dwelling units in the back. We can't make that argument.
You cannot?
No, we can't make that argument. So, however, when you look at Main Street now, that section of town from really the bridge down here on Main Street, all the way up to Gallagher's is not commercial, it's residential. So, we actually might cover that with our mixed-use application.
Or to make much of in-town Caribou all part of the mixed-use zone eliminates the struggle and strife in the future.
Well, he's got ample parking spaces if he wants to have a multi-units.
What did he say for a number, 8 or 10? Is that what you said?
It was 8 or 9.
8 or 9? Yeah.
But I think he was going to keep the office space in the front that he had initially rented out.
Yep.
That was a good revenue source for him at that time.
Where's the old Ford dealership?
You know where Nylander Museum
Right
is?
in our block.
Right across the street.
Same building.
Gotcha,
style.
thank you.
Yep.
Yep. I'm just trying to, which end of the street are the higher numbers on?
So it
Yeah.
had multiple large bays in the back of
Yeah.
the building, large garage
The
doors.
building is a challenge, because those bays were all at different levels.
Yeah,
Oh.
right.
They kind of
I've been
stepped
in that
down
years
towards
ago.
the rear. The bays themselves weren't finished. I mean, they were just concrete. So, anyway, knowing the developer and some of the developments that he's been involved in, I think that he could do a good job, but it's just he's a non-conforming use. And right now, we don't have much to help him. We can try to rezone, but we can't rezone for both uses.
Was there a proposal to expand the building also, or just the existing building?
Just the existing building.
Is it that big?
No, it's pretty good size.
Yeah, it's big.
Yep.
So what would be an impediment to rezone that? You said it's a C2 right now, right?
Currently, it's a C2, but it's adjacent to an R2 district.
And he wants
So,
residential with an accessory dwelling, or,
So we could fix that by rezoning to an R2, except that we can't have him do the commercial aspects.
right.
well, he has other commercial space, so that's not an issue for him. But
But if we're gonna use this new mixed-use technique, that might cover the whole thing.
Right.
this would be a good bellwether, wouldn't it not be?
Can,
But then we might come up against the land use table.
that's what I was wondering. I was like, there's
Yeah.
no, that's not in the, there's no, because if it's two uses, you have to restrict
Wow.
one use. So just like,
A mixture.
like La Plante's,
But do you?
You don't.
So right now, we would do commercial on the first floor and residential on the second, right?
which is what we allow
In the commercial district.
In the commercial district, right. But you
So-
can only, so we
But
have to go
He
up.
doesn't have a second floor, but
Right.
he has an extended back part of the
Yeah.
building.
The two houses that are adjacent to that building going back towards the Unitarian Church there's 2 or 3 actual houses there.
Yep.
How are they zoned?
R2. That whole area just behind there, there's 2 housing developments, large ones. There's many apartment buildings, and there's a whole bunch of...
Oh, no, I know, I'm talking about on Main Street there. you
On
know.
Main Street.
Yeah, on Main Street. There's 2 houses, right,
Yep.
2 or 3 houses right
Yep,
there,
so
on the
those are-
same side of the road,
Those are
going back towards
multi-unit
Caribou
dwellings.
Stream.
Yep. So one is, no, one's a single-family dwelling, and the other one is a...
Right, it's a multi...
T&A or something.
T&A, yeah. It's a,
Short-term rental.
short-term rental, I guess. I guess what I'm getting at is, are we gonna create some type of spot zoning problem? That's what I'm getting at.
He's,
And
he
that's what
won't
we
be,
need to
he
avoid.
won't be able to, the state fire marshal, that will
For
be
the
a
second use.
nightmare.
Yeah,
That will be a nightmare.
that's a good point.
He will have to have firewalls in there, fire separation walls. That will be a nightmare to do. That's, I was like, there's got to be a reason why people don't do that, and that's exactly why it is. Because if you have commercial on the first floor, you can separate it going vertically, but it's hard to do it horizontally in a building. And you're changing the use of the building, so it'll have to be upgraded to current code. Yeah.
But he's an experienced developer, and he's
Yeah.
working actually with a good technician
Yeah.
who's up to date with all the fire marshal stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a wicked interesting situation.
And he's also paying taxes on an empty building, which
Yeah.
has got to be biting him in the,
Yeah.
in the behind.
Right.
So it's one of those things you like to be able to work with your developer and say, how can we get you started on this project?
Yeah.
So, but there are some techniques available to us. There's going to be some limitations we're going to have to figure out. But
Yeah.
So,
now's a great time to be discussing this, though.
he mentions a good point. If that Ford dealership building is surrounded by R2, we're really not spot zoning if we're just changing it and encompassing it into R2, right?
The next commercial development is all the way to Gallagher's Insurance, I believe. It's over a half-mile up the street. Gallagher's and Big Pete, Big Cheese. and-
Yeah.
Going up further.
Well, can we act on that in the not-too-distant future, since the request has,
And we don't have a request.
We don't have anything in front of us.
written request, and I had that conversation as well. It's like,
Yeah.
if you want us to act on this and rezone, the way the zoning is right now, we could go to an R2 situation.
So it was just an informal discussion?
So far, it's just a conversation.
okay.
Yeah.
Right, but if you go to the R2, then you're not allowed that storefront.
Right.
Oh, it has
So-
to be a certain, it can be a certain percentage, right? It can be up to 50% as a home occupation, right? That's what I was
Yeah,
saying.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
But
but well, wouldn't that be in a single-family home only, though?
right.
You see, that's where it's gonna
That's-
get
It's
beat.
it's in the ordinance on under C2.
So he's already aware, and like I
So
said.
you could have one person, or one family living there with a storefront,
Yeah,
and that's
dwelling-
essentially it.
One dwelling unit on
Yeah.
the first floor.
But up-
Otherwise, it's
up to
gotta be on the.
50%.
Because that's
Yeah.
essentially what you got across the
And so
street.
they're aware that they'll be doing subdivision review, so, because they're putting in like 8 units. So that's more than your 3 units, that's the subdivision review. So he is aware of all these things,
Yeah.
but
A lot of firewalls going in there.
Well, I don't even know how you,
it can be done.
yeah,
They did it at the New Evergreen Bowling Alley, they did it at the
yeah,
Party Grill.
Hilltop.
Hilltop.
yeah.
But gosh, the expense.
Well,
Fire separation's not really that bad. If you have to build an actual fire wall, that would be a structural problem, but fire separation's a couple layers of sheetrock and
Yeah.
some caulking.
It would be good for us, though, to look into multi-use zoning, South Main Street, North Main Street, Sweden Street, High Street, Bennett Drive.
Have you seen the proposed zoning map that has the mixed-use zone on it?
No, I don't think.
Well, there's one, there's one
we'll bring it
floating
all.
around, there's one.
Yeah, we'll bring that all over.
Yeah.
In May. I think it's a great time to have.
I know it's
those.
worked out well in communities in southern Maine, Freeport, and, I mean,
Yeah.
other places that seem to just love it.
Yeah.
But we'll leave chickens out in the farms. No chickens.
R3, right? R3?
Our sister city, the South, is doing a new ordinance
Well, I
regarding.
saw that.
No roosters.
No roosters, oh, yeah. And you gotta get a permit.
I'm just wondering if there's going to be isn't there a new state law that right to,
So the sovereign
There
food
we go.
laws.
It hasn't been figured out yet.
Well, that's what I'm
Because I'm
wondering.
involved, I mean,
I
I'm
know.
involved on the very
Right.
edges
So-
of it.
so legal
And we
counsel-
don't have any, there's almost no
Yeah.
decisions been made on that
So
rule.
legal counsel tells us that we make allotments for 3/4 of our entire township to have that application.
and then that's not a hardship.
So our
anymore,
densely
Yeah,
developed areas just don't lend themselves to that kind of
yeah,
use.
that makes sense. Okay.
That's my story. I'm sticking to it. Yeah. So we'll extend this conversation into May.
Oh, do you, when we were doing the land use table, that whole exercise, did we have MU on the table?
Yes, it was on the.
Okay, thank you. I was like, oh no, couldn't
Definitely.
remember.
Yeah. Okay, so for old business, these applications that we've had for a while, I haven't heard anything back from these people. And, you know, we've chased them, so they're gonna have to get back with us and resubmit. So that would be the home occupation on the Madawaska Road, the fellow that wanted to do auto detailing, Mr. Ed. And also the Dan Boys event planning site on West Presque Isle Road. Unfortunately, both of these probably need attention because I believe they're both active now. I noticed that Mr. Enright has put his service out on Google Maps. So when you zoom into the area, it pops up there. There's a little auto detailing on the Madawaska Road. So they may get some city attention, but it might not be the attention they really want right now. And so Dan already gave us an update regarding the proposal for the Caribou Trailer Park property. I would add that the Caribou Trailer Park property will have one more tenant leave by the end of this month. That's already been settled in court. The rest of the trailer park should be closed in July. We've actually got one that the roof peeled off in a windstorm earlier in the season, so that one should be easier to rehouse because they're currently not there. So. And that was my segue into the staff report, apparently. So the trailer park eviction notice for Lot 87, that's underway. That's April 30th, I mentioned. And then the rest of the park closure in 2023. As Dan said, we have a community garden project up there. I think they'll probably hit the ground running. And it won't be long because the snow is receding nicely right now. Did they already harrow that spot out there?
They did a good part of
It
it.
scratched around a little bit, I noticed, yeah. So 15 Prospect Street has been an ongoing project that's gone to legal. legal has informed me that the paperwork has been drawn up, and they will expedite the soonest court date they can get to move forward on that. So that was a conversation of just the other day. Next Riverfront Renaissance Committee meeting is April 18th. So we'll be discussing our latest fundraising effort with the Northern Border Regional Commission. We actually had a meeting today where we discussed our letter of intent. City Council on Monday evening approved allowing us to explore this fundraising option by sending a letter of intent. And I believe the idea is to have that written and will be reviewed at NMDC and then forwarded to DECD and then finally off to the Northern Border Commission. If the letter of intent is approved, we get invited into the grant round, which will happen rapidly, and we need to submit by June. And then we get to wait because we won't find out till the end of August.
Ken, there's a N missing at the end of Northern in that.
Northern Border Regional Commission. Did I miss one? The N's missing?
And in Northern. Save us a little time,
I'll make sure I catch that on the minutes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
In the City of Caribou Cannabis Policy, City Council's Planning Board combined meeting has been postponed. The applicant has actually been informed, and no further action is anticipated at this time. And, as Dan mentioned earlier in the liaison minutes, Chapter 22, the Caribou Development Committee ordinance has been passed and is law today?
Today.
As of today. I believe they have some applicants already. So they'll take a minute, form their committee, and then set forward their goals. And there's lots of work to do, so I think it's a
How many
good committee.
applicants are you looking, or how many spots are you looking at? And you've
So-
had a lot of
Yep.
applicants.
And why we mentioned it tonight is because one of those positions has to be from the planning board. And I've already got one applicant. Mr. Corvo has applied. So,
Is that
But I
a
could-
minimum or a maximum?
competition's good.
So that's a
So if anyone
minimum.
else wants to apply,
So that's a maximum.
Don't ruin his birthday. you
so
guys.
the
I know.
slot is for one person, but it's a council appointment, so they get to decide. But we're covered in a way.
But what you're saying is you can't have two planning board members.
You could.
Right.
No, he's
So
saying you can't.
I don't know if they've made allowances for just volunteers, like we did for the Renaissance Committee. Because we decided that we'd have unlimited volunteers, so you don't want to turn away volunteers. I don't recall that either. It's actually right here. I didn't read it into that.
Pardon?
I didn't read
I
that.
didn't think to consider it, actually. Not a bad idea. Could be changed.
And that's all I brought this evening.
Why, thank you, Mr. Murchison. Nothing left on the agenda. Who's chomping at the bit?
I want to stay here all night.
So you'd stay here all night on your birthday.
I
Right?
would.
Dedication.
I'll motion to adjourn.
Is
Appointed by
a-
majority vote of the planning board members. Was that done?
Oh, it does have to be. Well, we
Well,
need,
that's what it says.
we have an
Oh.
action item.
We have an action item.
So apparently the application for the planning board member has to be approved by the planning board.
Correct.
We haven't, I don't have the application. I want to vet this.
Is that new?
I'm joking.
It is. It's part of
It's
the
in
ordinance. Yeah.
So, can we do that
So it requires a motion.
tonight?
Yeah.
Okay.
I make the motion.
To
Approve Mr. Corvo.
sit on the Caribou Development Committee? Okay.
I second it.
We have a motion by Eric, seconded by JR. Take a roll call vote. Steve?
Yes.
JR?
Yes.
I have to abstain.
I was going to say,
Yes.
that's not a majority, so I have to vote
No.
yes. So the planning board has approved Dave's application for Caribou Development Committee.
Now, out of curiosity, could Dave, let's say this fine gentleman wanted to represent the planning board, could Dave still sit on that committee as a plain old citizen? Plain old taxpayer?
So there are citizens appointed
Fine,
positions.
Fine, certainly.
I mean, that wasn't discussed prior to your motion.
Well, that's what we were kind
We
of,
did give everyone the option to apply, though.
yeah, yeah.
We'll show it in the minutes.
I think that was in January. January? February. One of those months. Lovely. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will motion to adjourn.
JR has made a motion.
Second.
Seconded by Steve. Take a roll call vote. Steve?
Yes.
JR?
Yes.
Dave?
Yep.
Eric?
Yes.
We are adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mike's up.
Dan, who are the members that sit on the Airport Advisory Committee?